Thank you, David. And thank you for joining us for the question and answer session. If there's anything you'd like to ask, please submit your questions via the Ask a Question icon on the right-hand side of the video screen. I'm going to start the Q&A session with a couple of pre-submitted questions. The first one has to do with the solution finder function of the Navigator. Our viewer says, I've run different searches using the solution finder, and sometimes the results list is too long. There are too many standards included on it.
Yep.
Are the results prioritized in any way?
Well, first of all, in terms of how you use the solution finder, as I was explaining beforehand, it's very important to be selected by the use of the filters, by the actual drop-down options and the tick boxes. So certainly if you're getting too many results, it could be worth revisiting what you've answered and what you've put into your solution finder responses, because that's the best way in which you can really get a targeted answer. So I think certainly try that for now anyway. In terms of are they prioritized? Yes, I mean, as you saw me demonstrate previously, I was then looking for an example of purchasing in a more sustainable way, and the very top result there was about BS 8903, sustainable procurement. So there's a lot of back-end work that's gone into the solution finder to make sure that based on the answers given within those 4 questions, we find the most appropriate and most targeted response. And as you move down through the list, you'll find that other thematically related and relevant standards do come up, but certainly the first 2, 3, 4, 5 will be specifically related to the answers you've given us in the solution finder.
Thank you. The other question I've got here, where does the content come from? Is the content of the Navigator BSI-led only?
It is, in the sense that for the most part what you're going to find on the Navigator as it stands right now are British standards, European standards that we've adopted, and international standards, ISO standards as well. So for the most part, that's the content of the solution of the Navigator itself. From time to time, as you heard me say beforehand, you will find references to content that is being hosted by other sites, principally DEFRA and BIS, government, and also RAP as well. We also do link, where relevant, to other standards, what we may say are not formal standards through the BSI process, but still standards nonetheless. An example of that would be the GHG, or Greenhouse Gas Protocol. So that's there as well. The standard, the Navigator as it stands right now, is a prototype. So when we made the initial decision on what to include in terms of content, we as I said beforehand, we made a cut on about 230 or so standards. So that's what's there. But certainly any future iterations of the Navigator will look at enhancing that with additional standards that we ourselves publish and further sources of information.
Thank you. Let's move to the questions from our live audience now. The first question starts with a very positive comment.
Okay.
An excellent initiative.
Great.
To what extent have you as yet given this international visibility? And if so, what sort of feedback is being received? Are others up to similar things?
Okay, taking that first question then, international visibility. I mean, we know from some of the traffic we received already, the standard, the Navigator went live in May, and already we've been tracking usage of the Navigator, looking at the stats that have been coming through, and we've seen that actually it's already got a global audience. So we've had people who have come through to the Navigator from the USA and the Far East as well. So yeah, in that sense, we're getting an international audience, which is great to see. Obviously, the content of the Navigator, the standards themselves, are applicable internationally, so that's no surprise perhaps. In terms of the promotion, I think the question was, how are we promoting it internationally? Well, this is really the start of the process. It went live in May, somewhat of a soft launch, I think because of the fact that we were quite close to the summer period. We decided to hold back until now. So the webinar that you've just watched, and you're watching now, the demonstration you've just watched, is being streamed internationally. We know, again, from people who've registered to use this, a lot of people from all around the globe there. So yes, the appeal's definitely global because the content is global, and this is the beginning, I think, of very much a worldwide promotion.
Thank you. And there was a second part of that
yes,
question which had to do with are others up to similar things? Are there similar initiatives
from other
standards
bodies? Not that I know of, no. I guess some of them face some of the same challenges I said at the beginning of the demonstration, which is the journey itself in terms of the sustainability and how standards can help, can sometimes be complex, sometimes be confusing. So I've not seen any evidence of any other standards bodies globally doing something like this. So it could well be we're pioneering there, as we have done in so many other ways in terms of standards.
And just another reminder for our viewers before we move on, if you do have any questions that you'd like to raise, please submit them via the Ask a Question icon that you can find on the right-hand side of your video screen. And I will move on with the next question from a live audience viewer. Is this seen as a BSI pilot exercise that is intended to move across all BSI standards to this sort of platform?
Very good question. It's a pilot in the sense that it's a prototype, and we wanted to put something out there, as we did in May, which had a select series of standards that we thought were the key documents of guidance and best practice which best reflected our standards programme, be they standards developed by BSI as British standards or international standards. So we decided to draw the line or the circle around about 230, as I said, and certainly we'll be reviewing that when we come towards the end of the year as a sort of a V2 of the Navigator. In terms of where we go from there, BSI across other areas of work, certainly there are other colleagues of ours who have expressed an interest in what the Navigator has achieved so far in terms of its global reach, its functionality. So I think it's both a pilot in the sense of sustainability standards. I think it also is a pilot which I think is certainly going to be reviewed internally in terms of how best we can communicate the widest possible message across really all of our standards in our entire portfolio. So I think yes to both of those questions. So it's interesting and exciting times.
Thank you. And another interesting question from our live audience. It appears that there are some themes and standards that are missing from the Navigator, for example, environmental science. Are you going to address this in the future?
I think we will do. I'm sure we will do. We'll be definitely reviewing exactly where people have been looking. Part of the whole site traffic monitoring has been exploring where people are most clicking, where the hotspots are on that sort of initial cut of 8 themes. So I think that in itself indicates where the direction of travel is in terms of interest from users. As I said beforehand, we have a wide range of standards addressing many different themes. We decided to put a circle around that initial cut of about 200 or so and drop them into 8 major themes, and then, as you heard me say beforehand, the sub-themes thereafter. The area that's been referred to there is one that certainly is of increasing importance, and I think when we review the Navigator towards the end of the year, we'll look at whether or not that category and theme and sub-theme merit maybe a section on their own, and it's part of the ongoing review of the Navigator.
Thank you. And there's an interesting question on the content of the Navigator that has just come in. In terms of content, it seems sustainability has a green environmental bias. The true definition of the term has 3 pillars. Will BSI be moving into economic sustainability guides, for instance?
Well, certainly of those 8 themes, we do include social responsibility. So I think we also address resource management. So I think within those 8 themes we've got on that first page, I think we cover the economic, environmental and social as well. So there's definitely a route into the 3 pillars, the triple bottom line in terms of sustainability. I think again, this is really up for part of the review. I think if it's a case of are we giving the best exposure to those standards that address that need through the current Navigator, I think that will be determined very much by the traffic, by the surveys we get, the responses we get, by the emails we get. If people are saying, I can't find this, do you have any standards that meet my need? Then that's a case of us reviewing the fact that, yeah, we do have them, people aren't finding them, we need to address that. If equally it's a case of people responding and asking us questions saying, I'm looking for this type of solution, I don't seem to be able to find it. If we don't have a standard that meets that need, well, that suggests that's where we can develop a new work programme in order to respond to that challenge. So in a way, it's just great to get the feedback, and I welcome that kind of question.
The next question is similar to the one we got in our previous webinar session. It's a question and commentary. Most links lead to shop. The Navigator is available to use for free, but you charge for the standards that it links to. Why is that?
Well, the reason why we charge is the way BSI is set up. We're a private company. We're actually a Royal Charter company, and we don't have any shareholders, for example. So we're non-profit distributing. So the revenue we raise through the sale of standards goes back into BSI as a business, and that helps support the business of developing standards. So that's why we therefore charge for standards. As I was saying in the demonstration, in passing, there are examples of documents that you can get through the Navigator, through onto the shop, which are free downloads. And that's just because of the nature of the arrangement we have, maybe with, if it's a case of a PAS, the organisation that sponsors the PAS has agreed to make that freely available. But for the most part, the documents you see are saleable documents, and that's in order to support the continual development and enhancement of the standards we develop.
Thank you. And another question has just come in, very similar to a question we got again in our previous session. It has to do with the applicability of the Navigator. My organisation is based in North America. Can I use the Navigator and the standards on it, or are they for UK audience only?
No, very much we welcome wider use of standards. Again, that's very much part of the agenda really with the Navigators, making sure people understand more about standards that are out there and their applicability. So, as I said beforehand, what you'll find on the Navigator is a route into, a window into a range of different standards, some of which are British standards, and they'll have BS 1234. Some may be European standards, so typically BS EN 1234. Some could be international ISO standards, and they would be maybe BS ISO 1234. The fact that they have BS in front of them doesn't mean to say that therefore they're only applicable to the UK. Pretty much all the standards we develop and publish are available and applicable to businesses of all shapes and sizes across all sectors. There are some examples, I can't think of many actually, that we point to through the Navigator, but just across the wide range of British standards we do publish and host through our shop. There are some which make reference to UK or European legislation, because that's, in a way, they've been developed in response to the needs of either regulators or industry to address that particular challenge. So in that sense, maybe it could be less applicable to a North American audience, unless of course they're perhaps exporting their products into Europe or the UK, in which case compliance with a European British standard could be obviously of significant interest to them. For the most part, they are universally applicable. So certainly the answer is yes, the Navigator is a global resource, and the standards you can find through them are widely used across the planet.
Thank you, David. I believe we have the time for another couple of questions,
okay.
Perhaps. This one is quite a specific question. I want to access an older version of a standard. How do I go about doing that?
Okay, so it could be the case that what someone's maybe, they know what they're looking for, they've done a search either through the thematic route or through the solution find, and they've found an updated version of a standard, and they're wondering how they can find that. So in a way, the solution finder will find the most current version. That's part of the extensive sort of back-end work we've done to make sure you find exactly the right match. If someone is looking for a previous version of that, then once they're on the shop, then by keying in that ISO 1234, they will find previous versions of that standard that are on the shop. It'll be clearly marked if it's been withdrawn or superseded, but if for some reason they do want to have access to that, they can do. So that's probably if it's the case that they're wondering why that's not come up in the search results, it will be because we're showing the ones that are most applicable to the audience, therefore the current ones.
Thank you. One last question, perhaps? This seems like a good question to wrap up around. Why are we talking about standards? Why are standards important?
Well, standards are very important. Obviously, we would say that anyway. One thing I'd probably want to put out there by way of clarification is that standards are not regulation as such, therefore they're voluntary tools of good practice. It's often worth clarifying that as well, but they're often there to support and allow organisations to comply to regulation. So one would ask the question, why is regulation important? But what standards offer, which is distinct from regulation, is in a way they enable organisations to maybe meet their minimum legal requirements in a certain sector, but also exceed and go beyond that as well. Our strapline at BSI is making excellence a habit. It's very much important from our point of view that we publish standards of good practice that allow organisations to aspire to climb the ladder of performance and make sure they are both meeting legal requirements if that's the nature of the business they're in, but also accelerate innovation, optimize their performance, manage quality, mitigate against risk, and grow in a more sustainable way through the application of good practice. And that's good practice that's been developed by experts in our technical committees in the UK, but also internationally as well. So this is the distilled wisdom in a way of what good looks like, is effectively what a standard is. And that would say, I would say it's reason enough to follow the best practice within standards.
Thank you, David. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Thank you to our live audience for the excellent questions.
And thank you for tuning in, yes. And if this webinar has actually whet your appetite for the Navigator, you haven't yet tried it, please do so. And please feedback so we can enhance it and continually improve it in the next iteration. Thanks.